We are going to talk about Texas because the Texas Supreme Court did something recently that was quiet, but kind of a big deal. And it involves this right here. They just issued an order. It's not a ruling. They just said this is an order adopting a comment to Canon 4 of the Texas Code of Judicial Conduct. This is like the rule book for ethics when it comes to judges. And among other things in this rule book, it says things like you shouldn't do anything that might be seen as partisan. You don't want to give people the idea you can't be fair, you can't adjudicate a case fairly. And so here they are saying, we made a quick change. And if you scroll down, everyone signed off on it. There's 8 people on this list. I think there was one who did not sign off on it, but not because he disagreed. He just wasn't there. But it's a one-page thing, and here you go. Here's the comment. It is not a violation of these canons for a judge to publicly refrain from performing a wedding ceremony based upon a sincerely held religious belief. And as soon as you see those words right there, sincerely held religious belief, you know some shit is going down. So let's talk about what this means and why this one sentence is a big freaking deal here. And to make sense of it, you got to understand who this woman is. Her name is Dianne Hensley. You could see it right there. So here's what happened with Dianne. Okay, so we have to go back to 2019. It is December, and Dianne over here is one of the Texas justices of the peace. And she has the ability to sign wedding certificates for various couples. And she said, if a couple visits my courthouse and they're gay, I don't want to sign their marriage license. Even though I am not a priest, I'm just a public official, I don't want to sign those gay wedding certificates. And the thing is, she very much said, oh, if you're straight, I will sign your certificates. And by the way, I think they get paid if they do the ceremony. It's a little side hustle for the judges. She said, I totally want to do that for straight couples, just not the gay ones. And when she said that, she was given a public warning from the Texas Commission on Judicial Conduct. They basically said, listen, you have a choice. You can do no weddings or you can do all the legal weddings, but you don't get to pick and choose based on, the sexual orientation of the people involved. And when I say they gave her a warning, I'm not kidding about that. This is a slap on the wrist. They didn't remove her from the job. They didn't fine her, sue her, anything like that. They just said, hey, Dianne, you're casting doubt on your ability, your capacity to act impartially. And if you kind of keep doing this, we may actually have to punish you. That's what their letter to her said. And what did Dianne do in response to that letter? She sued the Commission on Judicial Conduct. This is from 2019. In its lawsuit, First Liberty argues that First Liberty is a right-wing legal group. The commission violated the Texas Religious Freedom Restoration Act by investigating and punishing Judge Hensley for recusing herself from officiating at same-sex weddings in accordance with the commands of her Christian faith, adding, by investigating and punishing her for acting in accordance with the commands of her Christian faith, the state of Texas has substantially burdened the free exercise of her religion with no compelling justification. And that's such a wild thing to say about her. Like, no compelling justification? The compelling justification is that people deserve to be treated equally under the law. That's it. Gay people have a right to get their wedding certificates signed off on, their marriage license, and they should be allowed to go to a judge and get it signed. And a judge who offers to perform ceremonies for straight couples but not gay ones shouldn't be a judge. What are you doing at that point? You don't care about the law. So being Christian should not be a get out of jail free card for just doing your damn job. It's not okay when Kim Davis does it, even though they're fighting this thing. It's not okay when Dianne Hensley does it. And they said she was substantially burdened. In no way did the commission impede on her rights by telling her, follow the law so we don't have to punish you for it. She was suing. She was asking for $10,000 in damages because that's the money she would have made from her wedding ceremony side hustle. And she also wanted a declaration that anyone in my position is also allowed to say no to gay couples. So in 2021, a judge tosses out her entire case, but they do it on a technicality, basically saying you're not allowed to sue the ethics commission because they warned you about something you didn't like. That makes no sense. And an appeals court later said, yeah, what that earlier court said. But then Dianne Hensley said, well, I know people at the Texas Supreme Court, so I'm going to ask them to step in and weigh in on this. And in 2023, we literally had arguments in front of the Texas Supreme Court about this situation. And who was representing Dianne Hensley? It was a guy named Jonathan Mitchell, who is best known as the guy who is behind the Texas abortion bounty hunter law. The one that says if you know someone who had an abortion and you rat them out, we'll pay you for it. That's Jonathan Mitchell. And this is what he said at the time in 2023. Mitchell further argued that state law protects people's religious freedom unless there is a furtherance of a compelling government interest. He also said it prohibits wedding officiants from discriminating based on race, national origin, or religion. And he said, notably absent from that list of protected criteria I just mentioned is any mention of discrimination on account of sex or sexual orientation. He is saying it's totally legal if Judge Hensley doesn't want to marry a couple because of their sex or sexual orientation. Totally fine. It's still permissible for wedding officiants, whether they're judges or members of the clergy, to discriminate based on anything else as long as it's not race, national origin, or religion when they decide which weddings they will officiate. So you see, the Republican position here is discrimination is good as long as, legally you didn't put it on the list. Therefore, the dog is allowed to play basketball. Air Bud rules. They apply here. So apparently, they're seriously going to the Supreme Court and saying she's Christian, so she shouldn't have to follow the law. And that's all. She's not allowed technically, he said, to be a racist bigot, but she is allowed to be an anti-LGBTQ bigot, even though both of those things involve characteristics you don't choose for yourself. Now, Hensley could have avoided all of this if she just said, I don't want to perform marriages. No wedding ceremonies for me. That's it. Like, no one was forcing her to do that, but she wanted the ability to get paid to perform straight wedding ceremonies while denying gay couples the right to get married. She thought her religion took priority over the law, and she's a government official. So, the problem here is if you allow government officials to do that, it throws the government into chaos. It makes a mockery out of civil rights. And honestly, I don't even know how seriously they take we would never discriminate on account of race, because guess what? There are some Christians out there who will say God doesn't want the races intermingling. So I have heard stories of churches that kicked people out because they were mixed race. It happens, not often, but that's a real thing people have. So what's stopping a judge from saying my faith says I don't do interracial marriages? Is that racial discrimination, or is it your Christian beliefs taking precedence, right? And as the ethics commissioner told the same Supreme Court, no one's threatening this lady. No one's punishing her. Hensley, no one's punishing her for her religious views. We are going after her for her actions. If a Christian judge says, I am not performing any marriages because of my anti-gay bigotry, that's fine. Hensley wanted to offer the service, but take same-sex couples off her client list. That was the problem. So, interesting situation. By the way, this has nothing to do with the story, but a couple of years ago, the Dallas Morning News did an article about Hensley, and they had this tidbit that is wild. Hensley said her older brother, who died of ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, was gay. Oh, interesting. But look at this. After he had a falling out with their parents over what she described as economics, Hensley said she hired a detective to track him down once a year and take a photograph as a gift for their mother. One year he was in Paris, another year in Japan, then Dubai. This crazy lady stalked her gay brother who wanted nothing to do with the family in order for the stalker to take proof of life photos that she could send to their mother. Holy crap. This family is so effing weird. So anyway, this is where we're at right now. Anyway, her lawyers also argued that the US Supreme Court is on our side about this because they allowed a Colorado website designer who said, I don't want to make wedding websites for gay couples. They sided with her, which is a weird case because literally 0 gay couples asked that lady to make them a wedding website. But that's how Christians do lawsuits. And also, there's a difference between a private business owner and a government official. I don't know why her own lawyers didn't get that. So that was in 2023. What was the Texas Supreme Court going to do about this case? Honestly, it didn't really get resolved. They kind of avoided the religious freedom argument, and then the Texas Commission on Judicial Conduct dismissed any warnings against Hensley. And then an appeals court said you're still allowed to sue if you want to. It was just a hot mess, very confusing to follow. Meanwhile, there was another judge in Dianne Hensley's situation who filed his own lawsuit for basically the same reasons. At some point here, the Texas Supreme Court needed to weigh in on this matter. And that brings us to what I said at the beginning of this segment, which is they recently passed a rule about this. And again, here's the rule that they passed. It is not a violation of these canons for a judge to publicly refrain from performing a wedding ceremony based upon a sincerely held religious belief. So they're not even ruling on a case. They just kind of threw it out there. What this means is if a judge has a faith-based reason for denying the marital legitimacy of a couple that wants to get married, they cannot be reprimanded for ethical violations. You can't say, well, this kind of makes you look like a bigot and I don't feel safe in your courtroom. Doesn't matter. It's not a violation of the code. Like, by this logic, I wonder, because again, I want to go back to this. What does this say? If you don't want to perform a wedding ceremony because of your sincerely held religious beliefs, it's fine. It's not a violation of the ethics rules. What is stopping another judge from saying, I'm not performing a ceremony for mixed race couples? Or if you want to argue, well, race is not allowed as a factor. Well, what about a judge who says, I don't want to perform a wedding for this couple because I know they had sex before they got married. They've talked about it. Is that allowed? That's legal. Like, I don't know. And it also doesn't mean the judges are off the hook, because what if a gay couple, goes to a Texas court to get married and a judge refuses to sign off on it because of their faith? Maybe the ethics commission won't go after them, but the gay couple can still sue the judge for violating the law, which is what happened in the Kim Davis situation, right? This is what one professor said about all of this. Let me show you this. Here we go. Jason Mazzoni, a law professor at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, what did he say? Someone could, however, challenge a judge's decision not to marry gay couples on constitutional equal protection grounds in the future. One of the claims I think will be made in response to litigation, in litigating that, is that, well, there are other people who can perform the wedding ceremony, so you can't insist that a particular judge does it. But that, of course, is not how equal protection works. And it's not how we expect government officials to operate, which is true. Like, if you go to the government, you should expect the same service as everybody else. That's kind of why we do it. And this lady has a no gays allowed policy for her wedding ceremonies. So I don't know what happens now. Like, on the one hand, gay couples are free to get married if they want to, but now the state's highest court says judges who don't want to perform the ceremony and sign the necessary documents can deny you the paperwork that you need to get married. That is state-sanctioned discrimination. So this is not some minor tweak to the ethics code. It is a declaration that Christian prejudice is compatible with public service as long as you're like wearing a cross when you do it. And it sends a message to LGBTQ people in Texas that your humanity is conditional and it's entirely based on what judge you're in front of. And who knows where else that slippery slope is going to lead. So this is power. This is Christian power. If they say I have a sincerely held religious belief, it overrides civil rights laws. We've seen that at the federal level. We are seeing that at the state level. And it's kind of sad that Texas has chosen to use religion as a weapon this way, but that's not news. They're making it easier to discriminate against certain groups of people who are already struggling to protect the rights they have. So, sad situation. I will stop there for now. Thanks for becoming a YouTube member. I appreciate that. Thanks for the donation. Lawrence goes at the same time as Obergefell. Oh, you're saying that the case that said sodomy is not illegal may be overturned as soon as the Supreme Court overturns the marriage equality ruling. I used to think the Supreme Court would take small steps when they want to walk back civil rights law, but they're very much swinging for the fences and doing anything they can right now to hurt vulnerable communities. So I wouldn't be surprised if you're right, but that is frightening. Is Texas any different from Tehran? Oof. I mean, they're also brown. I mean, it's not that. I mean, that's the scary thing. It's not every time we talk about Texas, it very much seems like these are theocrats who are getting their way. And that's, I guess, where you're coming from with that question. But man, the question I want to ask is, does Ted Cruz understand what you're saying here? Does Greg Abbott? Do any of these guys understand that they are religious nutballs, except they're doing it for a different team than Tehran? I don't know. How does that translate to other parts of her job? For example, what if Dianne Hensley is overseeing a trial and a same-sex spouse cites spousal privilege as a reason not to testify? Yeah, it's an interesting question. I don't know the answer to it. I have no indication she's ever denied one of these people in this type of relationship the ability to do what the law required. But I think it's a fair question. If you're going into her courtroom and you know she has anti-LGBTQ bias, I don't know. I would do everything in my power if I were in those shoes to request a different judge because she cannot be trusted. When you're a public figure, you have restrictions on what you should say. It's about protecting the integrity of what you're representing. These people have to get over that fact. Right. I mean, the Supreme Court, have you ever seen any interviews with the Supreme Court justice? They're boring as hell because they're not allowed to talk about anything that matters. So they always talk about like, well, democracy is nice. And judges are these types of people. Like they never say anything of value, even judges I like, because yes, they are restricted. And it seems like politicians have forgotten that that rule should apply to them too. Who married JD and Usha? You know what's interesting? I think they did two types of ceremonies because I feel like I've seen pictures of JD Vance wearing Indian garb because they must have done an Indian ceremony, which, by the way, would not have been weird if you're marrying into an Indian family and you're not JD Vance at the time. You're not a politician. You're just guy who graduated from Yale Law School and wrote a crappy book. It would not be weird to me that they had both kinds of ceremonies. And if you're JD Vance, you sit there and you take it. You deal with it. It's a long ceremony, but whatever. This is the family you're marrying into. So I assume they had two types of ceremonies, even if only one of them counted.